A boss propositioned me, and when I wouldn't have sex with him, he withheld my paycheck and I couldn't pay my rent.
Jewel, you were singing at dive bars at the age of 8, left home at 15, and homeless by 19.
Statistically, I should become a prostitute or a drug addict.
Most of us would have given up, but you didn't. And as a result, you are here today with 4 Grammy Award nominations and over 30 million albums sold. So Jewel, how did you keep getting back up?
My mom left when I was 8. My dad took over raising us. He became, abusive, alcoholic, and I was raised bar singing. I had men put dimes in my hands and fold my fingers over them and say, "You're going to be great to f when you're 16, call me." I grew up in a really wild environment, dangerous, confusing. And I ended up making the choice to move out when I was 15. And I knew that statistically that was very dangerous. It wasn't something I would allow myself to do lightly, just thinking it'll all work out. It was a dangerous thing, and I knew it. Statistically, I should become a prostitute or a drug addict. Like, that's just how that decision should work out. So what did I think I was going to do different at 15 that would not lead to that outcome? And so as I looked at it, there was a couple things I knew. One is we all deal with pain. Why the hell aren't we taught what to do with it? So my number one job was, how do I move toward pain instead of avoid it? Because growing up in bars, I saw a lot of avoidance. I saw drugs and sex and all these things that didn't help. I learned about the buffalo that was the only animal that went into the heart of a storm. And I remember writing down, the quickest ways through. How can I move toward my pain rather than away? And how can I do no harm to myself in the process? Is that possible?
Nice. Can I ask you a quick question with that, Jewel? Because as you were saying, right, there's a lot of messiness that goes with these kind of neat and tidy messages and the things that you did. But how did you know in that moment to go towards the storm? Because in those moments, even though the buffalo does, it's absolutely scary. But you've said that you can't outrun the pain. So what was it in that moment that led you to believe in, even though it was painful, you still needed to move towards it?
It was 2 things. One, I think I was in 5th grade and I learned that oysters take an irritant like a grain of sand and they make a pearl out of it. And I realized that humans don't do that very often. We take a piece of sand, an irritant, a wound, a hurt, and we cover it with something else to avoid it. And then I watched people die. I watched men die that were regulars that didn't even have enough money for a coffin. And they were Vietnam War vets, and they were doing their best to deal with a tremendous amount of pain, but they did it by covering it with more and more now what I would call coping mechanisms, and that they didn't work. And so I saw really clearly examples of people that if they wanted to heal at 60, now they had to go through all of the other things that ended up kind of inflicting more harm, and they still had to deal with the original pain. That's a shitty proposition. It's a really crappy proposition. And it was, to me, very clear. I'm dyslexic, so I'm very visual. I would literally see this visual in my head, like a picture. And it had a meaning and I understood it. It meant something to me. And then when I learned about the buffalo, and then you pair that with, I was writing from a young age. I was journaling. And so that's biofeedback. I had a real experience of, if I did move toward my pain with observation and curiosity, I felt a little better. And so if you're willing to just try, what if as an experiment, I kind of got more curious about my pain instead of tried to disassociate from it, and you get a little relief, you just did it's a new biofeedback loop, right? I didn't know that at the time, but I did have an experience, even though I was confused and overwhelmed and scared and it was a shit show. I also had an experience of when I wrote, it felt a little better. Didn't solve everything, but it did take some of the pressure off. And it made me willing to try it again and other things that work. And I think that really helped me.
That is so powerful. Thank you for taking us through it, because I'm always thinking about where people are right now and then how they hear your message. And so starting with where you started from and where you are today, right? That I think really gives people the hope. And I think hope is so damn important to give someone that one little, hey, there's a light. Then it's how do I move towards the light, right? And so when people think the light is an oncoming train, they're not going to move towards it. So that's why even giving that one little step of, okay, how do you go from hope to then moving towards it? That journaling, like even if it feels messy, even if it's painful, it's such a great tool for someone listening right now to start, even if they don't believe they're going to get to the other end. So thank you for taking me through it. And I've heard you talk about that. You started like, as you were journaling, you were writing down what your hands were doing. This I found fascinating. Please explain to me what it was about watching your hands, what that did to you mentally, and then how that actually allowed you to really take acknowledgement to what was happening in your life.
Yeah, it was a lot of things that it was a lot of things I learned that I didn't realize were important that were kind of catalyzed or galvanized around this moment when I was looking at my hands. It was like I was able to put a lot of dots together suddenly. Um, I did move out. I paid rent. I had a cabin. I paid bills. Did pretty good. Ended up moving to San Diego to take care of my mom who was sick. A boss propositioned me, and when I wouldn't have sex with him, he withheld my paycheck and I couldn't pay my rent. And had to tell my sick mom we were going to get kicked out. We both decided to live in our cars until I could get a new job and get first and last month's rent, on a new apartment. But my car got stolen. I ended up homeless. My mom went back to Alaska, and I kept thinking I'll figure this out. I'll get back on my feet, but I didn't. It just got worse and worse. I started having worse and worse panic attacks. They had started when I was 16. I didn't even know what the word panic attack was. I didn't even know the word trauma. I didn't know the word trigger. It was just this overwhelming, right, thing that would happen to me. I had begun shoplifting when I was about 15 or 16. I got some things right and I got some things wrong. uh,
Do you think that was a coping mechanism for you at the time?
it was two things. One, it was just pure survival. It became a very unhealthy coping mechanism because it moved beyond I'm starving, I need to steal food to stealing luxury items. That's it's a real shift. That's a problem.
Right.
Didn't need them. So yeah, it definitely went into coping mechanism for sure. And so while I was homeless, my shoplifting increased. That's when it became non-food items. Um, my panic attacks really increased, and I became agoraphobic, which is a fear of leaving your home, or in my case, a street corner where I lived. I thought if I left it, I would get sick, and I was sick a lot. I had kidney problems. I almost died in an emergency room parking lot because they wouldn't see me because I didn't have insurance. My life was a shit show, and I realized I was gonna die or be in jail if I didn't do something, and that really came to me when I was in a dressing room shoving a dress down my pants, trying to steal a dress, and I saw my reflection in the mirror, and I was like, I am a statistic. I didn't beat the odds. Like this grand vision when I was 15 of not being a statistic. I mean, I avoided some things. I didn't become a stripper, or that's good. I didn't do drugs ever. I never drank. But here I was clearly addicted to shoplifting. And it was no good. What was happening in my life was no good. I was a homeless kid stealing. And so I remembered this quote, it was probably a stoic, a stoicism quote, but it was something like, happiness doesn't depend on who you are or what you have. It depends on what you think. And I didn't have anything else. I had my thoughts. And so tantalizing, could I really turn my life around one thought at a time? I decided to try, stole the dress anyway, but decided to see if I could learn to turn my thoughts around and realized very quickly I couldn't tell what I was thinking. I didn't know the word disassociative, but in hindsight, I was so disassociative, I could not witness my thoughts in real time. And that was a problem if you're going to change your thoughts, right? You have to know what you're thinking. So I had to figure out a solution. And I realized my hands were the servants of my thought. So if you don't want to know what you're thinking, watch what your hands are doing because it's a world of action and our thoughts create action. And so even though I couldn't see what I was thinking, I could see what I was doing very easily. And so I decided to follow my hands for 2 weeks. This was my huge life plan. Write down everything they did. I literally was writing down, washed my hands,
Yeah.
wouldn't shake a hand,
Mm.
opened a door, but I don't know what I was looking for. But at the end of 2 weeks, I decided to sit down with my little notes and see if I could see a pattern. What could I deduce? And it suddenly hit me that I hadn't had a panic attack in the 2 weeks. Hadn't even realized I didn't have a panic attack until that moment, and I was like, "Holy smokes." It felt like those drug trials where it's like we're trying to heal glaucoma, but your eyelashes grow. I was like,
Yeah. Oh, isn't it Viagra that was like for something else? It was like for a heart condition, and all these guys are like, "Don't take me off it."
exactly. It felt like a radical side effect of this experiment.
Mm,
What I had stumbled onto was mindfulness. What I had stumbled onto was being so radically present that I didn't have time to think about other things and worry about things that hadn't happened yet.
mm,
Now, I had read a lot of Descartes when I was younger, and I think therefore I am. Famous quote by Descartes. What I realized in that moment, in those little pieces that came together was if I could rephrase ever so humbly what Descartes said, I would say I perceive what I think, therefore I am.
mhm,
You're not your thoughts. You're the observer of your thoughts. And I knew instantly that was powerful. I knew instantly I just put myself in the driver's seat of my own life because my brain was not the driver. My brain was a steering wheel and I was the driver. Now you can call that whatever you want, your soul. I don't know, doesn't matter, don't care. I call it the observer with a capital O. If I could perceive I was sad, I was something other than sad. I was observing sad. That gave me a bit of distance, right, from personalizing and confusing my behaviors with who I was.
mhm,
Super important. It helped me get a little bit of detachment from my thoughts as separate from me. Very critical and important. And I now realize that I needed to strengthen my relationship with my observer, which you can only do by being in real time, by perceiving in real time, right? It's the power of why being present is pretty magical. And I realized, like, again, because I'm visual, it was like this three-step thing. I had a thought, I could put a gap, and then I could act on the thought. The bigger that gap is, I call it the little window of change. That window, the bigger window you can give yourself, the more change you can accomplish in your life. Because what normally happens is we have a thought and we act on it. There's no gap. That's reaction. That's reactionary. That's a neural programming that you don't question and you have a strong stimulus and response and you just react the way you were trained to. Your life will never change no matter what. So that gap is everything. That's why we teach people to meditate. That's why meditation's powerful. The thing that for some reason knew innately at that moment was it was for me a two-step process. Cultivating the ability to be present, consciously present is one skill. Then now what? What
mhm,
action am I going to take? I call that putting mindfulness in motion. And I don't know why, but I had some weird talent at that age for realizing I had to create actionable steps. I had to build the muscle of being present. Now that I was present, how was I going to respond differently rather than react as I was programmed to? And just to sum it up, I think that's where my life really started changing. And I started to develop and get very good at developing actionable habit building exercises for myself that would begin to target one pain point at a time. And I actually started with shoplifting. That was my first thing. I was like, I have to change that habit.
mhm. Oh my God, Jules, I didn't want to interrupt you. There's so much amazing stuff there, girl. I want to go back and really piece them apart and actually go a little deeper on a few things because these are the moments I'm always thinking about, that big pivot moment that like someone may need to hear or that can really resonate. And I want to go back to where you actually started, where you were like in a moment where, okay, you didn't go into stripping and this guy basically said, I'm not going to pay you unless you sleep with me. And in that moment, in what you said, you're like, and so I just told my mom, like, okay, well, mom, my sick mom, we're going to have to live in a car. In your storytelling, you didn't hesitate to go, oh, should I maybe? What is that? Is that innately part of you? Because I think that that becomes one of those pivot moments where someone listening right now may go, well, I can't live in my car. My mum is sick. Okay, even though this goes against my morals, my beliefs, and my values, I'm going to do it anyway. And that then becomes a downward spiral in and of itself. How did you choose to not make that decision?
A lot of things led up to it. Little decisions I made before. I mentioned earlier, I'm going to try to do no harm. I'm going to try to make decisions but don't hurt me. I'm gonna try to figure out a way to deal with my pain in a way that doesn't injure myself. I decided to never drink or do drugs when I was ridiculously young, and somehow I stuck to it. That was a good decision.
Mm.
It was a commitment. It was a dedication, not the drinking, the dedication of not trying not to harm myself. When you dedicate yourself to something, it's a center of gravity and it begins to influence all of your decisions. And you don't know how those things will add up later. So it was kind of a devotion, right? That I started. I did lots of hurtful things to myself. I didn't always see all the ways
Cool.
that I was hurting myself. But some were real clear. And men were real clear to me because I grew up bar singing. Because I had men try to sexually leverage me pre-sex age, you know? Um, I had a man push me up against a wall in a bar when I was 12 and measure my throat and say, "Have you been cheating on me?"
Oh.
Very scary, very intimidating. And I was watching women in bars compromised their hurt, their wounds compromised them into doing harmful things with men. So I just saw this thing playing out with men from a very young age. I had a hell of an education.
Mhm.
I had men coming on to me from such a young age, saying such shocking things that you would freeze. And then later you would say, "Why didn't I say this back?" Or "Why didn't I respond like this?" Well, it happened so many times. I got to where I could in real time learn how to use my voice
Mhm.
and not just freeze and learn to be incredibly savvy, to realize my sexuality was never to be used by me as a pawn, to never take a sexual advance as personal because I saw what these men did with woman after woman, and it was not personal to the woman. It was relative to the man's wounding and needs and shit. So I learned to never take it personal if a man came on to me. I learned to never use my sexuality as a weapon or to weaponize it or to try and get my own validation because I saw it playing out and I saw it didn't work. And then I think the more tricky part of this is, I'm not sure why, but maybe it's that I was raised as a pioneer on a homestead. I was taught to be self-sufficient. I moved out at 15. That's a certain personality type that's like, "I'll try. I'll figure it out.
Mhm.
I'll go my own way." I didn't wanna be leveraged, and I knew it. In my heart, I do not want any MFer to leverage me. I don't wanna be leveraged. I'm that way to this day. And so you kinda combine all that into this horrific moment when this boss is gonna withhold a paycheck and you realize your options are really crappy. It didn't seem like that hard of a choice because of the
Mhm.
tremendous amount of experience that I had. And I knew that if you compromise your own integrity and authenticity, it was like a bank account you just depleted. So you think you're gonna benefit because you get to stay in your apartment, and you think you're gonna benefit because you're gonna avoid some short-term pain, but the price you pay is significant. And I just, because of my life experience, had a front row seat to what the cost was. And I do have to say, like, I work with a lot of kids now in very difficult situations. When you invest in your character as if it's the stock market, it is the best investment you will ever make. Even when it looks like you have to pay the worst price, which it doesn't get a ton worse than like being kicked out of your home and living on the street. It is a stock market that pays dividends in magic. And I couldn't see it at the time. It took me a while to see it, but that's what caused me to be on the street. That's what caused me to figure out, how do I stop shoplifting? Maybe I could replace it with writing. That caused me to be a very prolific writer because I was a very prolific thief. That caused me to getting discovered. That caused me to having my dream job. It's a stock market. Invest in your character. Do not compromise that. Magic works out. You just don't get to know it right away.
Oh my God. I love that so much. And even like everything you said, but then especially where you started, like I just made a declaration to myself. Like that is so powerful. Because I think that if we're able to, you talk a lot about habits as well. And so what is that declaration you've made yourself? Have people even made a declaration? And so I think that that's a beautiful place to start. And then the commitment part, that becomes a North Star. And I think that when you're in moments of turmoil and struggle, when you're on your knees, it is so hard to see past like your own, nose. And so how the hell do you get back up? Having a North Star that is a declaration that now you're committed to is so damn beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. And then also part of your message that I've heard you say so much that really goes along with this is that you choose happiness. Now, I was really shocked when I first heard you say this, because as I was diving into your world, it's like when you hear somebody who has been who's grown up with parents who are divorced, and an abusive father, homeless, everything you've just laid out, anxiety, like agoraphobia. And then for you to say, but you still choose happiness, I feel is so freeing and beautiful. So in going into that, in choosing happiness, and you said that it's a skill, how do you start to move towards choosing it? How do you refine the skill of happiness so that we can, whether it's you want to be a singer or you just want to have a roof over your head with a beautiful family, like how do you start to refine that skill set?
What I've learned about happiness is it's a side effect. It's a side effect of choices. You can't get happy. It's not like a country you discover and you pack your bags and you move there forever. um, it's also not a permanent state. Mental health is having the right feeling at the right time. Mental health is being angry when you've been hurt, when you've hurt yourself. That's health. So I do think sometimes the wellness culture can kind of paint that we're all looking for this eternal state of happiness. I just kind of want to say that isn't necessarily the goal. Happiness is a side effect of choices. Choices are the side effect of usually thoughts, uh, motivations. Now, when we're hurt at a young age, we don't know we're hurt necessarily. We don't realize how that hurt is affecting our choices. And we don't realize how those choices are affecting our ability because they're not leading to the causes of happiness. So you can't get happy, but you can get very curious about what are the causes of happiness? What are the choices that lead to nourishing outcomes? So happiness can be a bit of a glib word. I kind of sometimes will talk glibly about like happiness is a learnable skill. It is, but it's more that you're learning to make choices that create an environment of overall happiness. Um, Not that you won't have bad times and life won't break your heart. So I think it's a combination of resilience. Resilience is skill sets. So I just think of resilience as you want a full tool belt so that if it's a drought, you have a tool. If it's a flood, you have a tool. If it's betrayal, you have a tool. If it's whatever, boredom, you have a tool. So just think of resilience as I'm building my toolkit. What tool? I need more than one tool to handle life. That's resilience. And the other is, can I examine my thoughts, my hurt, my misunderstandings, my wounds, so that I can be empowered to make actions that aren't determined by that, right? I was a puppet a lot of my life to my wounding. I didn't realize my wounding and my insecurities and all these things were walking my mouth and hands and puppeting my behavior. My behavior led to outcomes. And so that's what I had to do. So the work is actually, again, building awareness, building being consciously present, and then finding behavioral tools to kind of systematically, let's tackle one pain point at a time.
Dude, this is so strong. I love talking about this because I think somewhere along the line, people have the misbelief that happiness is the end goal. And to your point, just like health, oh, once I get there, everything will be fine. But if we can change the idea that it isn't a permanent state, that just like sorrow, it will come and it will go. And you know the quote, like, this too shall pass. I actually started to do that in my happy moments. And I started to do it not to bum me out, but actually as an empowerment thing to go, enjoy it while it lasts, because if you expect your life is always going to be here, you're going to be very sadly mistaken. So now know that this isn't going to be a permanent state and this too shall pass. So now while you're here, while you're in this moment of happiness, how do you enjoy it? Because that then becomes the empowerment piece. And I've heard you talk about how much we sometimes lean on basically BS affirmations.
Yeah, healing is hard. You try to navigate through just, My mom was very spiritual. It ended up being very spiritually abusive. And so I think I'm probably acutely aware of these fine lines we have to
Mhm.
navigate between thinking the best and that also being self-abusive.
Mhm.
Ooh, what's the difference? That's a very nuanced thing. When am I kidding myself and just being like, nope, it's all going to be great. It's great. When is that a lie? When is it true? When is that powering? When is that you controlling your own perception and investing in a delusion? Those are very difficult waters to navigate. So I do want to be careful, when we talk about the power of our thoughts, they are powerful
Mhm.
and they can be a weapon. And it is up for us to ferret out. Am I being an ostrich with my head in the sand, pretending everything's great, trying to like shape my world with the power of my thoughts? Or am I hiding from the truth? Because the truth might be this is really painful and this isn't good. So I always try to keep everything that I do
Mhm.
very grounded in work, very grounded in my body's experience because my mind was so capable of like just talking myself in and out of anything.
Mhm.
One of the things that kind of keyed me onto this was once I realized my anxiety was an ally, once I realized my anxiety wasn't something to disassociate from or repress, but to bring closer, my life really changed. It's like food poisoning. If you eat bad fish, you get throw up. You shouldn't be mad at your body's throwing up. Your body's trying to tell you don't eat bad fish again. My body was my anxiety was my body's alarm system. It was the car alarm letting me know somebody was trying to break in. It was letting me know I was consuming something that didn't agree with me, and would I stop consuming it? So I quit being focused or fixated on, "Oh, no, I have anxiety again." I would go, "Ooh, this is exciting. I am anxious. That means my body is trying to tell me I just consumed a thought, a feeling, or an action that doesn't agree with me." So using my body, believing it was telling me the truth, I was anxious, stopping, right? Mindfully being conscious and going, "What was I thinking, feeling, or doing?" Then saying, "Well, I stopped thinking, feeling, or doing it," and seeing if you have a better outcome, seeing if your body has a better response. So you start to kind of systematically replace, the way I teach this exercise is every time you notice you're anxious, write down thinking, feeling, doing. Do it for a month. Look at your patterns. You're going to notice it's a recurring couple thoughts that keep causing you anxiety. It's a couple interactions. It's a couple habits, right? So things I would do that made me anxious might be isolation, isolating myself, not exercising. Um, thoughts would be, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm never going to figure this out. Um, feelings might be jealousy, envy. So you start to see like which ones are really getting you. And then I would try and just pick one and work on it. And so the thought I noticed that would send me into panic attacks a lot was, I don't know what I'm doing. That was true, by the way. I didn't know what I was doing. And according to kind of the new age philosophy in the 90s was make an affirmative thought. Like I would look in the mirror and say, I know what I'm doing. What was weird is my body didn't change with that thought. That was very interesting to me. Why didn't an affirmation work?
Mhm.
I could talk myself into having it over and over and berate myself, and just talk myself out of my anxiety. Or I could take it seriously and go, that's interesting. Why doesn't my body feel better when I do my affirmative thought? It's because it wasn't the truth. It was a way of me, I don't know, you could say gaslighting myself out of my own real experience. The experience was that didn't work. And I had to take that seriously. And so, what if I just trusted it and moved on to the next step? Now what? I know this one thought, I don't know what I'm doing, sends me into a tailspin. So, I begin to experiment. And so, I call it the antidote thought. Rather than looking for an affirmation that your body might not perceive as truth, look for something that's true. So after experimenting, I came across this sentence that caused my body to relax. And it was, I won't stop till I figure it out. To this day, when I say that out loud, including this moment, my entire body relaxes. I get chills saying that one sentence. It's so true about me. I could rest with that. And so every time I would have this circular thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I would, again, you develop being consciously present. I'm aware I'm having that thought. I'm going to now have a gap and I'm going to replace it with this thought, the antidote thought, the truth, a truth that caused my body. And the importance of that isn't like the magic of positive thinking. It's neurochemical, it's biochemical, it's physiological.
Mhm.
What I did was get myself out of a psychological biochemical posture of contraction, which causes all of my cognitive function to collapse, to a state of dilation, calmatory neurochemicals, and a place where now my cognitive and executive functions could take over again. And I was going to make better choices. So there's something very grounded and gritty about it. It's not just the magic of affirmative thinking or manifestation. Not that I don't believe in those things, but I think sometimes it gets painted into this magical, mystical thing that we don't know how it works. It's very grounded in neuroscience and allowing our brain to get and our psychology to get in a different posture so that we can make better choices that lead to better
Mm.
outcomes.
So many of us do that where we try to like, so we hear something, right? We hear a tool, and if you're really trying to improve your life, you'll try things. And so in moments where you try an affirmation and maybe your body doesn't really acknowledge it, you're going to maybe think of that as a failure and then move on. But to your point is assessing, and then how does it feel in your body? I think it's so damn genius that you were able to do that, to take your anxiety and instead of push it away, actually feel it, go, how do I use this as an ally? It is so damn strong to greet that instead of push it away. I did the same thing with my negative mindset, and the same thing was, who the hell do you think you are, Lisa? You know, I went from a stay-at-home wife for 8 years, Greek Orthodox, you're going to support your husband, that's your life, to then building a big company. And so a lot of the time in building that company, we just grew so quickly, I had no idea what I was doing. And the thing that saved me, the voice in the head that was like, you're no good, what the hell are you doing? The thing that saved me is I was like, oh, she's my best friend. She's warning me. And to the same conclusion, it was, well, you don't know what you're doing. Then you better learn. And in the idea that I can be the learner actually gave me the confidence, because it never put me, my back up against the wall, and it never put me in the corner of not knowing, because I identify as the learner. And so I feel like that's what you're saying with your anxiety, is that you're using it as a tool to give you a signal to say like, hey, over here. It's like, oh, okay, great. Now that I've seen you, I can greet you so I can do something about it.
It's a great example. It's, we kind of talked earlier about these North Star moments. What should you devote yourself to? Um, I think that for me, a devotion for me became, what if something's not wrong with me, that I'm anxious? What if it means something's right with me? That's a very good thing. If people want to figure out how do you start like kind of finding some North Stars to create this new constellation that you're going to navigate your life by. Start there. Maybe there's not something wrong with me. Maybe I'm anxious because there's something right with me. Let me get curious about that. And the other one is like a very unsexy thing. But when I look back at my life of why did I continue to kind of make choices that were healthier and healthier, it was because I was willing. And that's not a very sexy motto. But at each point when life brought me to my knees, I would just look within and go, but am I willing? Am I willing to try? And willingness ended up being a superpower. Humble willingness. I'm willing. I'm willing to do something different. I'm willing to let it be messy and just try. I'm willing to slog it out. I'm willing to try something new. I'm willing to keep experimenting. Willingness ends up being, I think, quite heroic, it's another good thing to dedicate yourself to. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing. I'm willing to figure it out.
Dude, that word is so damn powerful. And as you were saying, I was like, oh, it automatically eliminates the fear.
Yeah. It also, because again, I think kind of the danger of like when people hear about my life, it just sounds like I had this magical ability to navigate. It was very
Mm-hmm.
messy and very confusing. And it really kind of came down to, but I'm willing. Let me try. Let me try something. Did it work? Did it not work? It didn't work. I'm willing though. What am I going to try? And to kind of just take some comfort in, if that's where you're at in your life, it can still be really powerful.
Yeah, and I think that also people being able to use that no matter where they are, right? So depending on, like, if you find yourself right now to your knees, not even knowing how to get up, right? The willingness. And then no matter what stage you are in your life, whether it's about a relationship or a business or your mental health, like having the willingness to be curious, to want to find out a solution or a path forward, then ends up, whether it takes a day or a year, it will eventually show itself if you're still willing to be curious to find it. And I think that that's the main point over everything you're saying.
Yeah, because I think that we think other people know better. We think that maybe even a psychologist knows better, or whatever, any leader, any and not that we can't learn. We can. We can learn so much from people. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be your discernment that causes you to navigate this with great success. Again, it's not that my anxiety was wrong, it's that my anxiety was right. I had to start trusting my nature and my ability to just keep sifting through, keep experimenting, keep realizing that didn't work. I'm still willing to try something new. Let's try this. Did it work? And you start to accumulate, better and better discernment. It's
Mm.
training. It's not overnight.
Yeah, and the accountability piece. You always seem to take accountability for your actions and how you show up every day. And I have a quote of yours that like hit me so hard. Our lives rise to the level we accept. Like, talk to me about that because I really think that, like, okay, we're taking accountability of where your life is and then how much are you rising to it is so beautiful. How have you used that in your life?
I had every reason in my life to blame, uh,
Mhm.
my my unhappiness, but it wouldn't make my life change, unfortunately. So, having all the best excuses in the world doesn't make you happy.
Mhm.
It's really about now what? Like, do I like my experience? If not, now what? And, that's just a lot of self at the end of the day, no matter how your parents treated you, it's up to you to figure out how to be happy, and it's just better to come to terms with that.
Mhm.
If you wanna keep blaming and understanding all the reasons you shouldn't be happy, you're just wasting precious time. Like, again, go back to the stock market. Do you wanna spend your emotional energy, like, highlighting your litany of excuses? Or do you wanna go, "Okay, but now what? What am I going to do about it?" Nothing is more embarrassing than spending your whole adult life constantly blaming your childhood.
Mhm.
'Cause now what? It's like at some point, sadly, you are the adult, and I believe I am responsible for my own happiness, and I realized when I quit making excuses, I got a lot healthier. They could be very valid excuses, but all they do is take your emotional currency and invest it in a crappy stock market. When you wanna take that emotional currency and invest it in something that's gonna pay dividends, and that is by saying, "Alright, but what am I gonna do about it?" True,
Ah,
what am I gonna do about it?
that is so strong because literally you took the words out of my mouth. You had every excuse because the excuses are valid. Right, like that's almost the problem with excuses is that most of the time they are valid. It doesn't just feel valid, they actually are. No one would have blamed you if you ended up on a stripper pole. Like, in all honesty, right? It's like, oh my God, of course, to your point that you even started with, statistically speaking, growing up in the environment you did, statistically speaking, that's where you ended up. And so no one would have almost judged you or thought anything else of you, but it's your life and you didn't accept that. And then so for you to take accountability of that, is so freaking huge that I think that having the willingness to take the accountability, looking at your thoughts, really thinking through what life do I want, where do I want to end up, how do I show up every day, and then how do I make sure that my thoughts lead to my actions. Homie has been such a beautiful guide in this episode for people to really take and implement in their lives no matter where they are. Thank you so, so much for being here. Where can people find you and just all the incredible things that you're doing and all the just way that your support that you're putting towards mental health and helping people?
Thanks. The honor to get to share my story and, talk about all this. We just launched a mental health platform virtually. It's called Inner World. We're a mental health intervention site that teaches behavioral tools in a peer-to-peer setting. You'll come in and to a private setting, then you go into a group setting if you choose, and there's other people where you'll see everybody. It's like a little video game basically, but it's live and there's real people. talking that are all struggling with something, a wide variety. And then we have over 100 classes a week. There's no more than 30 people at a time, but the classes are about living with social anxiety, living with depression, living with a narcissist, a wide variety of topics. And every session revolves around a tool. So if you have social anxiety and you go to a social anxiety meeting, you might learn a tool called Solve It Ahead, where it says, what do you want to do? Grocery shopping. What's the worst case scenario? What's your worst fear that could happen? You write it out. What would you do if this happened? And you make a real structured plan. I would call so and so. I would do such and such. You make a plan. All right. Then what's your best case scenario? And then how could we maybe influence where that might happen? We don't get to control it, but maybe we can influence where that's possible. And then what's the most likely scenario? What's probably the most likely thing to happen? And so that skill then arms people to start to heal agoraphobia. We had a woman that had left her home in 4 years, and she started using this tool. She decided to have inner world on her phone, like live. So she had like live people with her friends that she'd cultivated in our community. And she went to a concert of 5,000 people in 4 months, to where her therapist started coming into our platform to be like, what happened? I worked with this
Oh
woman
my
for
God.
4 years. So it's a wonderful platform. It's a freemium platform, so you can come in for free. The most expensive it'll ever be is $8 a month, which when you add that over years, cheaper than a few therapy sessions. So I think that's the best way if people want to learn more, learn about my tools. I do teach some of my skill sets. The other ones are all clinically proven. We're a behavioral research platform. We're a clinical research platform. This is safe. This is tremendous oversight, and it's accessible to everybody.
This is the new era for mental health, I think, of people who, there's some weird stigma still over it, and I think that we just need to get rid of it. But how do we actually do it, right? There's one thing in hoping and wanting, and there's another thing in actually doing. And so this has been like, this is what keeps me up at night. And so hearing about what you guys are doing is so freaking powerful and beautiful. And I think that anyone who has that concern of where do I start, like it just gives an amazing starting point without the fear of, oh God, you know, what is it like to walk into a doctor's room, or what is it like to be in front of other people? So guys, honestly, go check out Inner World. Go check out everything this woman is doing. It is so damn incredible. If you're not following me, follow me at Lisa Bilyeu. And until next time, guys, be the hero of your own life. Peace. If you're totally fed up of people walking all over you and you want to know how to finally stand up for yourself and take your power back, then click here right now. So many of us women feel the pressure to get married, have kids, have the career before it's, let's say, too late.